am having, Mac.
Sonic the Hedgehog has fought so many bad guys, and honestly, a lot of them are really strong. Like, it takes a lot out of Sonic to beat them, and in many cases, he can't even do it alone. Because of the many foes that Sonic the Hedgehog has fought against, I was curious as to which of them was the strongest. So here, I present to you a top 10 strongest Sonic villains list. Now, I didn't put Shadow the Hedgehog or any other really Sonic rival on this list, because a lot of them kind of just switch over to the good side, or sometimes they kind of play in the middle. Like, Shadow is the perfect example of this. So, I will tell you his placement in the video if he were to be on this list, but just know he's not on this top 10. That said, let's get into number 10. Going from weakest to strongest, we have Metal Sonic. Now, I want to talk about Metal Sonic here for a minute because I feel like if it were just his base form I was talking about here, where it's literally just the regular Metal Sonic, he probably would not have made this list. But considering the fact that he's able to take on many different forms like Neo Metal Sonic, Metal Madness, and Metal Overlord, he definitely needs to crack the top 10, at the very least at the 10 spot. Metal Sonic's strongest form is Metal Overlord, and it took Super Sonic, Super Tails, and Super Knuckles to take him down, and even then, it was a very tough battle. The only way to actually even hurt Neo Metal Sonic in the first place is to do your super attacks, where Sonic can do a team blast, but other than that, nothing really works against him. In a sense, he kind of has like a mild invincibility. And if you want to get a taste of that invincibility, you should definitely leave a like and subscribe on the video and turn on the post notifications bell, that way you're notified when I upload. Not to mention, Neo Metal Sonic throughout the game Sonic Heroes basically just spent time collecting data on all of the Sonic heroes, so essentially he was able to learn their moves and use them against him. In my opinion, this is the strongest Eggman robot, but it's still at only the number 10 spot. Moving on, we have to go to number 9 with Chaos, and that includes all forms, with his final and most strongest form being Perfect Chaos. Now you see, I kind of had a hard time ranking Chaos on this list because if base form Sonic can beat him, then what does that say about Chaos? But I realized that that's more of a testament of Sonic's strength and how much he's grown than it is a weakness of Chaos. And even then, I'd argue that base form Sonic could probably take down Neo Metal Sonic now on his own. And even then, as said by Takao, Perfect Chaos has the power to destroy the entire world. So if Sonic can take this thing down on his base form, then that just says that Sonic is super strong, not that Perfect Chaos is weak by any stretch of the imagination. In that case, I feel like I have to give Perfect Chaos the edge in strength when it goes against Neo Metal Sonic. However, in terms of durability, I think Neo Metal Sonic still has the edge, or Metal Overlord rather, considering it really doesn't have a weak spot. Chaos has a clear and obvious weak spot in every form he takes, its brain. That said, on his own, Chaos was able to destroy an entire city in a matter of moments. Who knew what would happen next if Super Sonic didn't show up? Oh, and it's also worth mentioning that Chaos is pretty much immortal, so he really just can't die. So that said, he can kind of just keep fighting, whereas Neo Metal Sonic or Metal Overlord is a machine and he can kind of just blow up. Moving on to my number 8 spot is probably one of my favorite Sonic villains ever, or at least in the top 5 anyway, and that is Mephiles the Dark. I feel like Mephiles is kind of an interesting case. While I don't think he's physically stronger than any of the previous characters I mentioned on this list, or any of the characters after on this list, I feel like his mental game is unmatched. I feel like he can easily outsmart just about anybody on this list. That said, I don't want to sit here and lie to you and say Mephiles isn't strong, because he is. He's able to go toe-to-toe against Shadow, and much like Chaos, he really can't die. He just gets sealed away, and that's really the end of it. Essentially what I'm trying to say here is he has immortality to a certain extent. I feel like I should address the elephant in the room, and that's that Mephiles is the only known character to actually kill Sonic, and even then, I don't think this is a testament to Mephiles' physical prowess, because that doesn't mean he was stronger than Sonic, he just kind of snuck up on him, so maybe he might be the most tactical Sonic villain, or one of them. In all honesty, if not for any other reason than this, I feel like Mephiles should be on this list. Another thing that I would like to mention regarding Mephiles is that he's literally half god. I mean, if you look at the whole idea of Solaris, it's the fusion between Mephiles and Iblis, and Mephiles is just one side of that coin. He's the brain, so he'd have to definitely be holding his own in order to be considered part god. This ultimately takes me to my number 7 on this list, and if Mephiles is the brains, then this person or beast is the brawn, and that is Iblis. What made Mephiles unique was the fact that he used portals and could travel through time and did all kinds of weird manipulation tactics, but what Iblis does here is actually literally just straight to the point. He can shoot fireballs and hit you with buildings, and he's huge, and he doesn't really speak, so he's not very intelligent, but he still knows what he's trying to do, if that makes any sense. Iblis, also being part god, is also immortal to a certain extent. Not to mention, Iblis is like extremely persistent. No matter how many times Silver and Blaze worked together to take him down, he just kept getting back up and fighting more and more and more. What makes this beast a bit harder to beat than like any of the other previously mentioned Sonic villains is that he really can't be touched. You see, when it came to Chaos, it took Super Sonic to take him down, and even then, in his previous form, Sonic could just straight up hit him. But Iblis here kind of only has one weakness, and if you touch any other part of his body, you're going to get burned by hot lava. It's because of the way Iblis is structured, I feel like Silver had the easiest route of defeating him. Not that he had it easy, but he didn't have to use any footholds or anything like that. He can just kind of just throw stuff at him and that'd be the end of it, although it would still take a lot of time for him to do. Moving on to my number 6 spot is Dr. Eggman. Now, I feel like I definitely had to include him on this list. It was really just a matter of where, and I feel like he's kind of at the sweet spot where he's pretty much in the middle. I feel like he has a chance of beating everyone below him, but in terms of anyone else above him, I definitely don't think he can take him down. But in the chance that Eggman is capable of beating these villains, then I think there is a very slim margin for error. You see, much like Mephiles, I feel like Eggman heavily relies on his brain. He's not physically strong, or actually he is, but in terms of fighting all these other villains, he wouldn't rely on his physical strength. He would probably use his machines or his brain in creating something that could probably best them. And I feel like in most cases, Eggman can kind of prove successful against fighting some of the other villains on this list. Worst case scenario, if Eggman really gets backed into a hole, he can probably just summon the entire Eggman army just for assistance, and he can probably regroup while they're attacking whatever he's fighting against. That in itself is actually an advantage that Eggman has over most of, if not all of the villains, with maybe the exception of Mephiles. He can create an army to kind of help him out if he needs it. At my number 5 spot is Final Hazard. This is a beast that uses the power of the Space Colony Arc and the 7 Chaos Emeralds. And not only that, but it needed the strength of Super Sonic and Super Shadow to take it down. And also, one of them nearly died in the process. I think what makes the Final Hazard so formidable is that it has a power that's really not expressed among any of the previous villains on this list. It can heal itself. A being that strong, being able to heal itself is so unfair, one might say. And I feel like with that kind of power, it has to be rather high on this list. That said, when BioLizard turned into Final Hazard, it kind of gave up the impenetrable skin it used to have. Final Hazard has these red boils on its face and body that make him really easy to be hit by Super Sonic and Super Shadow, so in that case, it kind of makes him a bit more open to attack. That said, Final Hazard makes up for this glaring weakness by allowing itself to shoot lasers from its mouth, protecting itself in a way, and it makes him a bit harder to close in on depending on who he's fighting against. I mean, I shouldn't have to overstate this, the power of both Super Sonic and Super Shadow was just barely enough. Yes, it deserves to be at the number 5 spot on this list. Okay, so at my top 4, now this honestly had gone through several reworkings because even during the recording of this video, I'm not 100% positive of the placement of the top 4 because it gets really tricky when you think about all of the powers each of these individuals possess. But at my number 4 spot is Time Eater. Now in the base forms of regular Sonic and Classic Sonic, Time Eater was able to take them down almost immediately with only one hit. And it's worth acknowledging that Time Eater was holding back its true power, but once the two Sonics were able to transform into their super forms, the tide began to change. It would be a massive understatement to call Time Eater strong, but I feel like that's not really where most of his power comes from. It doesn't come from, just being physically strong, it comes from all of the other things he's able to do. Sure, Time Eater can throw a miniature sun, that's great, but it can also obliterate time and space. Also, it can change the events of the current timeline. Like for whatever reason, Sonic was able to run through Crisis City, even though the events of that game technically really didn't even happen. Time Eater's got a lot of time-related powers, where it can kind of just pull people into different timelines and do things to the current timeline that other beasts in the Sonic the Hedgehog series have never been able to do. Time Eater has the power to destroy the entire universe, but I feel like the other beings above him would probably prevent him from even getting to that point. At my number 3 spot is Dark Gaia. Now, I feel like the reason why Dark Gaia is higher than Time Eater is because Dark Gaia actually has a lot of physical capabilities that I feel like could be very useful in taking down Time Eater. Like, for example, unlike Time Eater, Dark Gaia is immortal, and I feel like that'd be very useful in a battle between these two. If it comes down to it, it really would just be a battle of who can last the longest. Even then, Dark Gaia is so strong he's the only one to ever successfully wear out Supersonic. I mean, by the end of that boss battle, Supersonic was out, dude. Like, I mean, look at him, he falls right out of the sky because he's just so tired. And when you think about that, Sonic was working together against the counterpart of Dark Gaia, Light Gaia, so the two of them are the similar strength. So when Sonic, in his super form, was working together with someone of almost equal strength, if not equal strength to the Dark Gaia, and it took this much to take down Dark Gaia, it's a testament to just how strong Dark Gaia actually is. Also, even before it reached its final form, it was literally moving pieces of the Earth in the intro cutscene. Bro, this is insane. Another thing about Dark Gaia that adds to his strength is the fact that he has an unlimited supply of energy and can affect the emotions of everyday people who have nothing to do with what's going on. Essentially, if Dark Gaia wanted to, he could unleash his strongest attacks and create a bunch of minions to help him out, and also not get tired of doing so when fighting against whoever he's fighting against. Also, Dark Gaia has a near impenetrable force field that needed to be taken down by Supersonic, so it requires a super form or something of that skill or strength to take down a force field. We aren't even talking about the beast itself, we're talking about an ability of the beast. Admittedly, this was a really hard top 3. This was extremely hard. I'd even say a really hard top 4 as well when it comes to Time Eater too, but I'm gonna say at my number 2 spot is the End from Sonic Frontiers. Now, the reason I chose the End at my number 2 spot is because it has the power to one-shot Supersonic and completely take him out of his form. Also, it was able to one-shot Supreme and Supersonic in the final boss battle. This is the strongest Supersonic that we've ever seen in the history of Sonic the Hedgehog. Being able to do all kinds of different things in this form, and dude, it gets one-shot by the end. I feel like that's definitely a testament to the End's strength, because we've seen what Supersonic can do in this game. We've seen him take down Titans with ease. He's quote-unquote undefeatable. But the End can literally snatch him out of this form if it wants to. And the thing about it is, the Titans are no joke either, as we find out on Chaos Island that their weaponry is similar to that of the Eclipse Cannon from Sonic Adventure 2, which blew up half the moon. The End has destroyed planets before and nearly wiped out an entire species and took on 3 Titans at the same time. And to be totally honest, it really only lost on a technicality considering it was really manhandling all of them, but got sealed away at the very end. And the person who sealed it away died in the process. As the End said in its monologue, the ancients built an entire reality, cyberspace, to contain it, and that was the only way to defeat it. But once Sonic was able to unleash its power once again, we got to see just how powerful this being is supposed to be. And to top it all off, the End is a very interesting creature because it's supposed to be a visual representation of what the person who's looking at it perceives as death itself. In the end, we don't even really know what the End's true form is. To us, it just looks like a moon, but we have no idea what Sonic sees, what Sage sees, Eggman sees, or any of the characters in this series. The reason I emphasize this is because I feel like it's really important to know that there's an emotional attachment to whoever is fighting against this thing. Like, for Dark Gaia, for example, what if he were to fight the End? What would he see? He'd probably see something that likely slightly terrifies him. That said, initially the End was at my number 1 spot, but I kind of moved things around and I feel like a lot of it can be interchangeable, especially when you reach the top 4, but I feel like the number 1 spot goes to Solaris. Now, Solaris is very similar to that of Time Eater in a way, in which he's able to kind of distort and manipulate time itself. That said, there's one huge difference. Solaris is the god of time. Time Eater is just someone who's able to do a lot of things with time. There's multiple reasons why I gave Solaris the edge over the End and every other villain on this list, and that's the fact that it took 3 super forms to take him down, and even then, Solaris was not actually even destroyed, he was sealed away. But during its reign of terror, it can consume dimensions and all existing timelines. In this way, Solaris is not only the combined power of both Mephiles and Iblis, but also so much more. Also, did I mention that Solaris is immortal and pretty much invincible to like every single attack unless it's charged up by a super form. The funniest thing about it is I feel like Solaris is a really interesting case because I feel like he has a lot of superpowers or powers in general that many of the other villains on this list possess, and because of that, it makes him the #1 spot for me. But that is my top 10 Sonic villains, and as I said at the beginning of the video, I didn't include characters like Shadow, and I feel like if I were to, he'd probably be right above Time Eater. He would probably be at that 4 spot. But let me know all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. Who do you believe is the strongest Sonic villain? And did I miss anyone? Also, let me know that in the comment section down below as well. Anyway, this is Sonic signing out. Have a super blessed day, y'all.
Why are you playing that trash?